Hello,
Hi, Vanessa. How's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you, Nefertiti?
I'm doing well, up early here on the West Coast here in Nevada. So I'm here on an early start. Hopefully your afternoon is going really well.
It is. Thank you for asking. Thank you for getting up so early and doing this. This is awesome.
No, thank you for being here. I'm very excited. You're just very a woman of standard, very just on a pedestal. So I'm very excited to be moderating our chat today with you. And just we're just going to go in, really introduce you. This is Vanessa Vining. She is the Chief Diversity Officer with VaynerX. I did give you, kind of permission if you wanted to do a fun little intro. So I wasn't sure where you stood with that.
I'm open to a fun intro.
Okay, so we're going to start off with two truths and a lie, and Vanessa's going to lead us into her two truths and one lie, and we're going to reveal the lie later on in our conversation.
Let's see. Two truths and a lie. Anyone who's followed my career knows me would probably be able to lean into this. Two truths and a lie. I was the first Black person at my first ad agency for 7 years. I worked at Doist in my career journey, and I used to play in a band in high school.
All right, that's some interesting little tidbits. So I'm excited to see which one's the lie. And Vanessa, can you just tell us a little bit? Really, you are a Chief Diversity Officer, but I know you're much more than that. And just giving us a little intro of your title, your journey getting to the Chief Diversity Officer, and anything that you want to tell us in your intro.
Oh, sure. Thanks. Wow, my journey has been long. I mean, I hate to say this out loud, but I will say it because I'm really proud of it. This month is my 30th year working in advertising. And so I say it out loud. I say I'm proud of it. It's been quite a journey getting here. I'm originally from Chicago, native of Chicago, and I started my career there and worked at some of the top agencies in the market, and worked in general market as well as diverse and multicultural agencies. And so I have a really broad, diverse background. I've worked in media and strategy and investment. I've moved to New York in 2010, taking on a role working on AT&T's business. And I was the Associate Director of Diversity Strategy and Operations. And that really, if I had to think about my journey as a whole, was when the unlock happened for me around DE&I and diversity and inclusion and people and culture. So that role encompassed not only, leveraging my experience in advertising and media marketing, but also leaning into people and culture and leaning into supplier diversity and working with suppliers and helping them find ways to be included on plans. And as you can imagine, over the years, at least in my experience, we're starting to see some change now. But over the years, it's been a challenge for diverse publishers to get a seat at the table and to get fair and equitable share of dollars, marketing dollars. So I'm really glad to see that things are starting to change. But that was the unlock for me when I moved to New York, I said in 2010. And so, anyone in my role as a chief diversity officer or any type of diversity work, we're all busy. I mean, not only me, but anyone who leans into or has a passion for this. And as we all know, with George Floyd's murder a couple of years ago, everyone now is starting to take notice of things that as a Black woman, and I'm sure yourself as well, Nefertiti, we've lived with for a long time. And so I'm really glad to see that change is starting to happen. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me, but I'm super excited to be here and chat with you a little bit more.
All right, thank you, Vanessa. You touched on some really great points, especially, within advertising and marketing, we're now seeing an uptick of what does representation mean? What does diversity mean? And, as somebody of your status, and talking to like young professionals as myself, what are some things that, you've seen along your journey that may be challenging for us to overcome? And what are some advice that you may have around that?
I mean, there's so many things that we could lean into. I think the first thing I would lean into is, the challenge of being seen. I mean, I think, it's been the same fight over and over and over, and to be seen, to be heard, to just be considered human. And I think that's been the pervasive challenge for many, many years. But as I mentioned earlier, I think we're starting to see some change around that. But as it relates to, more of the marketing DE&I space, I mean, people have long, I have this funny saying, it's not funny, but I have this saying, you walk into the room and bias greets you at the door. You walk into a room and people automatically have this preconceived notion of who you are, what your journey is, what your experience is by literally looking at you. And so when you start to think about racial and social, political, economic factors, we shouldn't assume that we know a person just because you see them walk into a room. And, when we get to some other points of this conversation, I'll elaborate a little bit more. But, I often tell people, don't assume someone's journey by just looking at them. You really need to get to know that person. And I think that's where the change happens. And when people start to just not look at me or look at you or other people who are joining us today and say, you are a Black woman or a Hispanic man, or you walk into the room and people think they know who you are, but literally sit and get to know somebody. I think that's the unlock of change that needs to happen. And once we as a country and as a world start to stop looking at color so much and focusing on our differences and focus on the fact that we're all human, and then focus on the commonalities that we have, I think things that's an unlock. Things will change immensely when we start to do that as a whole.
I strongly agree. Exactly to what you said. It's like we're more than just what's on our book cover. And it goes into the great point of what intersectionality means to us, because yes, we're Black, we're also Black women, but what are other things that we may identify that people may not know just because they're looking at us?
Absolutely.
And I definitely want to just put in a point here really quick for those that may not know what intersectionality means. Intersectionality is basically the cross of race, gender, and class. And how does that identify you within the whole environment, within society and political views?
Right.
Oh my goodness. So Vanessa, I do want to get into a little more about kind of like, it's Pride Month, and then we're also celebrating Juneteenth. And what does that look like in relation to intersectionality? It may be some things that you may have seen within the media space that could be beneficial to audience or clients.
I think there's a lot. I mean, I first think that it's also Black Music Month. They cram it all in one month. It's all in one month. They're all overlapping nowadays. So I think it's really important. I think it's high time that people are starting to celebrate Juneteenth. I mean, for us, in the Black community, it's not new, but now it's becoming more of a focal point. Now it's a federal holiday. So I'm glad to see that we're finally here celebrating a point in time that we've long celebrated in communities of color for years. But the one thing that oftentimes happen when it's Pride or when it's, Juneteenth or Black Music Month, brands tend to lean into that moment. They put a toe in and then they stop and they leave. And I think brands have started to recognize doing that really hurts their brand more than helps their brand, right? And so I've been in the business a long time. I've seen all the ebbs and flows, of brands that have gotten it right, like a P&G. Marc Chagall is like doing great things there. And then I've seen other brands that have kind of missed the mark. But I think that authenticity is really important to showing up. So if you think about the aha moment, I call it the aha moment for brands. They started to realize, it's particularly with the LGBTQIA+ community. I used to work on that for GM a number of years ago. And it was interesting that, it was only a month and it was very young. I mean, people were not even really recognizing Pride globally the way they do now. And so they started looking at all the research and data like, wait, there's a lot of disposable income going on in this community. And, we can leverage that, and they're brand loyalists. So people in LGBTQI, once you convince us that you see us and hear us and we're in value us as a human being, we'll support your brand. The minute that changes, it's like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to go there. I don't know if I want to support this restaurant. I don't know if I want to support this brand because they don't support me. And I think that's that kind of that intersectionality we talked about. Whereas I'll use myself as an example. I'm a Black woman. I'm an executive. I'm also gay. So, people, and I'm a mother, and I'm also a mother, so people tend to put us in boxes. And once you start that unlock of like looking at people on the human level, that kind of diminishes a little bit. But I think for brands, they need to show up and be authentic and really have a real conversation. And make sure you stick around, because in this time, if we look at any of the research of the cohorts of Gen Z and millennials, like they're holding brands accountable. You show up, show out, not just during Pride Month, but 365 days a year, and support us. And that's when that happens, brands will win. And also the community wins because they'll be supporting us within the community.
Great points. Yeah, I think it's a bigger conversation, especially in our generation, where I've seen brands lately, like we're going in on Twitter, talking about like, how can you not communicate to your clients and your audience? Mm-hmm. And that's very big. I think just open communication, being authentically the brand and showing up each and every day, advocating for our rights, and not really switching up or going like ghosting us when the pressure's on. So you did touch on some great points. And the fact that, yes, like you're a Black woman, but you're also gay, you're also a mother, you're also in an executive seat. And nobody understands just the level of pressure that is every day, trying to show up for yourself, trying to show up for others while representing others at the same time.
And my journey was different. I didn't come out Nefertiti until I was like almost 40. So, again, growing up at a time when being gay or lesbian was not, it was scary. I mean, and so it wasn't until I started to see the changes and my boys got older that I felt more comfortable, because things were changing and they had friends who were part of the community. And so I felt like, okay, I think they'll be okay. And it was scary. I mean, by no means was it easy for me during the time that I came out. But I think what happened and the unlock for me personally was the why for me. Why am I not being happy? Why am I not being my authentic self? Here I am working with people and brands and telling them, be authentic, speak in their voice and you'll connect with them emotionally. And here I was scared, fearful of being who I am. And so when that happened, that unlock happened for me, I was able to even be more authentic in the work, more authentic in my life and my journey. And once that happened, it was just like, sky's the limit. But it wasn't even easy for me. And so when I mentor or talk to people about their journey, whatever that journey is, whether you're, trying to come out or career pathing or whatever that is, I always tell them to just find your voice, whatever that is, and lean into it, and it'll make it a lot easier. And you have support. It was one person who I talked to in confidence who said, you need to go on that journey. You need to be authentic to yourself. And I never named that person because they asked me not to, but once I did that, it was amazing for me. I said this before a couple of years ago, and it just came out of nowhere. I no longer live in the shadows of who I am. And that was so freeing for me personally on my journey to be an open lesbian woman.
I love that. Thank you, Vanessa, for just being very open and sharing that piece of you to us. Because I know a lot of people, it's scary, especially trying to climb up the corporate ladders. Like, do you hide the identity? Do you hide yourself until you get to the position you want to be? Or do you just be unapologetically you and just hope for the best, that people see you, invest in you the same way that you show up for yourself each and every day? So thank you. I think this is a, oh, go ahead.
No, companies need to do more of that to support. And that's what I love at VaynerX. Just to lean a little bit more back into what you asked me earlier about my journey and, you know, being the first chief diversity officer at VaynerX. I mean, it's great to work with a company that's built on the foundation of empathy, because I've always been an empathetic person. So now to get to do the work with a company that believes in that at the core, believes in that, and do the work to work with all of our amazing people in talent, and Claude Silver, who is my like ride or die chief. She's the chief heart officer at Vayner. Her and I are like tag teaming. And so for me, it's great. And I think anyone who works in this space has to have empathy at the core of who they are. Because if you don't, you're not able to authentically connect with people in a way that, you know, they can see and feel that you care. And so that is really, really important for anyone doing this work. Don't do it for glory. Don't do it because someone's trying to push you into doing it. Because we know over the last couple of years, there are companies say, oh, you're the Black employee, or you're the Hispanic or the Asian employee. You lead DE&I for our organization. No experience, no passion to do it, no desire. So they get wedged into doing this work, but it's not authentic. So I think you need to be intentional. Gary Vaynerchuk, my boss, was intentional. He said, we need to do more. He was intentional about hiring Black people into C-suite, Hispanic, like people of color into C-suite roles within the organization. And when you have that level of intentionality and you find the right person, that's the unlock. And I think that even if you think about brands, same thing that I talked about earlier, like what is important to this community, this population, and how do we reach them in an authentic way? How do we reach the LGBTQI plus community in an authentic way and let them know we care, we see them, we hear them? So to work for a company that believes that and have a boss that believes that in all of our leadership, it's amazing.
Yes, absolutely. Like, I just got to snap to that because, yeah. I think to what Easy says, like, you know, I got chills now. I think it's like towards when we get in our conversation, this is some very powerful stuff and things that need to be said, especially to other companies that's looking to improve their employee retention rate and just even the morality of their diverse employees. I know for myself, it's very hard. I've been in a prior company and, you know, getting asked like, well, what do you need? Especially as a Black woman here in this company. And I'm like, well, there's a whole like laundry list of things. I'm like, I have no idea what to even tell you. So I guess in your opinion, what are some of like the big three things that you see that companies could start off with in regards to trying to build D&I, trying to better access their employees and their resources?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, I think the most important thing, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, is value humanity, value empathy. Without that, without it being at the head of leadership, when leadership stops valuing people, they should stop leading, period. And there are companies out there that it's just, oh, you work for me and that's it. And they don't really lean into, okay, you work for me, but what's important to you? How can I help support you? I think that's the first thing that I would say. And I think the second is valuing the partnership of your CDO. If you don't have a CDO or someone who is passionate about being in this role, find someone. It is so, it's so important when you have, if you're a smaller company, you may be able to kind of manage it. But when you start to become a bigger company and 100, 200, or like Vayner, we're over 1,600 plus employees globally, it becomes more important to have someone whose primary focus is to be the partner in the organization, partner with our leadership. There's this misconception that a chief diversity officer owns all of the responsibility of creating change within an organization. That is the biggest lie. It is not my job. So if we win, it's all on me. If we don't win, it's all on me. That's not the right way to think. Someone said once, we're consultants. We're consultants to the organization, to the leadership, and driving change and within that organization. And so I think the valuing the partnership of what your chief diversity officer brings is really, really important to drive the change, and have an inclusive leadership is part of that as well. And I think the last thing that I would say is value what your community resource groups, employee resource groups, business resource groups, whatever groups you have internally. We call our groups community resource groups at Vayner. And invest in them, because if we talk about recruiting, retention, keeping employees happy, they're seen, they're heard, they know there's community at the core. Those groups are designed to do that, right? They're designed to help people find their tribe, but also within that, what resources can we provide them to help grow them through in the organization? Oftentimes in marketing and advertising, it makes me so sad when I look at the numbers of around diversity, particularly Black people. I'm just going to say it. I mean, it has not been kind, this industry, to Black people for a really, really long time. And I think now people are saying, oh, wow, okay, post George Floyd's murder, we need to recruit more Black people. Okay, it's time now. But it's like, it took so long. People kind of left the industry. And so we're kind of starting over again to try to first, educate people in communities of color, their opportunities in marketing and advertising, getting them educated on what that looks like, and then bringing them into companies and roles that help foster and ignite that energy in them, that unlock in them personally, that fuels their career. And so we haven't done a great job of it as an industry for people of color, particularly Black people. And so I'm really excited that companies are starting to look at what value these groups bring to an organization and how we can leverage these groups to help us with recruiting, retention, and people can grow in their careers. I think that's so important. And part of that too, as we talked about before, is like having like a DE&I like committee or council. So for example, one of the things that was started before I actually came on to VaynerX, and it's important to note this now, and I don't know if any of our community resource group leads are listening in today, they were central to me getting hired at Vayner. They advocated for this role. They pushed for this role. They said, we need someone here their role is to make sure that diversity permeates throughout our holding company and all of the branded agencies within our organization. And so they were central to getting me hired there. And so that's the role within any company that these groups can play and create community. So I think those were the three things. It would be, value humanity, value the partnership of your CDO, and value your resource groups.
I love that, because I'm like, it starts with the people. I'm like, the people are going to be the big voice advocating for what the community needs. And a lot of, I think sometimes executives, but just even on a global level, such as like in your company, is like they need to be empathetic to hearing some of these feedback, being open to changing their views, because as a society, as we go on, a lot of viewpoints are going to be challenged. And where do you stand on the line with that, So thank you so much for those three values.
A lot of it's not an indictment, but privilege still exists. And there are some people who recognize they have had privilege and continue to have privilege, who are working on changing that, but a CDO's role is to help a person who says, okay, I realize I have privilege. How can I pivot? I posted this on LinkedIn during Women's History Month, International Women's Day. We all have bias. We all do, including me. The unlock and the win is when you recognize and know what that bias is, and you pivot towards more inclusive ways of working, right? So when that happens, that's where the change happens. That's when you start to value, and where allyship shows up, and where you can support other communities. But yeah, it's gonna take time. I don't think it's gonna happen in my lifetime. I'm gonna do everything until my last breath to do what I can to drive that change. But it's gonna take time. It's gonna take a long time for it to really seed in and to be eradicated. And then some people that I talk to say, Vanessa, you got a pipe dream. It's never gonna go away. Well, I can dream, can I?
Right. Exactly. But look, you're the change as well. I'm like, being the first in these D&I space, I'm like, it just sets precedence for the next generation and big shoes to fill. Cause I'm like, look, I'm sure the next person that's gonna be coming in, like shadowing you is like, oh my gosh, like Vanessa has done a lot. Like, what can I add to the culture that's gonna be even further beyond what we believe to be, you know?
Yeah,
So I
I
really,
learned from them though too, Nefertiti. I tell the team all the time, I'm like, you guys give me life and energy. I learn from every single employee across VaynerX globally. I love it. I love what I do. I see them, I hear them, and they give me life. I really do. Every day, every day.
I love that. So if y'all are listening, Vanessa, I appreciate y'all every single day.
I do. I really do.
I love that. So I know I kind of skipped over. So I do want you to reveal your lie that we, kind of got introduced in the beginning.
Yes, yes. So anyone who knows me knows I've talked about this before. So can I tell the truth?
Yes, you can.
Truth.
And you go elaborate in more of that as well.
Okay, I'll tell you the truth and how it impacted me, both from a negative and a positive perspective. The truth is that I was the only person in my first ad agency, Black person, period, in our ad agency for 7 years when I started in advertising back in 1992. And it was a small general market shop. It wasn't huge, but there was myself, the Black person, and it was one Hispanic man who was in our accounting department. And we checked the box for diversity. We had no Asian employees. It was just him and I as the two people of color. And so it served two purposes. One, my upbringing, I kind of grew up a good portion of my younger years in a predominantly white neighborhood. So my two best friends at the time were two redhead, white brother and sister who taught me all about rock and roll and Kiss and ACDC. But when I moved back at just before high school to predominantly Black community, I was like catapulted back into a community of color. And I felt a little bit uneasy because I didn't eat certain foods that most people in Black communities eat. And so I talked a little bit differently. So I got teased and bullied a lot. But I think that experience prepared me to be the only Black person in the company for 7 years. But what it also taught me is that it taught me how to fight. Because I had a client who would not use, it was a financial client who would not use Black Enterprise magazine as part of their portfolio, of their print portfolio. And I kept saying, no, look at the number, look at the research. Numbers don't lie, numbers don't lie. Our head of analytics would be happy. He and I love numbers. And so I was like, finally, after like 2 or 3 years of like, no, you should be using them, I'm telling you, you'll get a lift. And they finally got tired of hearing me. And they said, okay, Vanessa, we'll do it. And they saw a lift. And so that tenacity to just dig in and continue to push, knowing what was the right thing to do and knowing that Black people have money. Where's this misconception? Now, I'm not going to say that there aren't people who don't do the right thing with their money, but there are a lot that do too, as well.
Yeah, we got the strongest power.
And yeah, exactly. So, so that was that upbringing bled into being able to deal in two worlds and push people that I was kind of like a little timid back then in my career to do the right thing. And then there was a positive result at the end that was really great. So yes, I was the only Black person in my first agency for 7 years. That's the truth.
That's wild. Yeah, no. And I think I'm there right with you. It's like, I grew up, I'm half African, half West African. So, trying to assimilate to Black culture was very foreign to me because I was like, I did not really grow up around Black people. And how do you kind of switch it up, kind of blend in, but still holding in the sense of your uniqueness and your authentically self? It was very hard. So thank you for sharing that because it's very real. Again, one of the perspectives of we're more than just Black women, we have such a diverse upbringing.
Exactly. And your story, I don't know if we have time to tell your family's journey, but oh my God, just inspiring, beyond inspiring. Beyond inspiring.
I appreciate that. All right. And then did you want to talk about the second truth?
Oh, there was only one truth.
Okay.
There was only one truth.
right. Thank you, Vanessa. And I'm not sure if Shauna was coming on or if that was on accident.
Hey, yeah, no, I can definitely jump in. And Vanessa, thank you so much for, sharing your perspective here. And I absolutely love the point where, you talked about taking a little bit longer to, come out in your journey. I know for me, I didn't get the privilege of coming out. I more so was discovered. But once we had National Coming Out Day, that was my opportunity to actually formally come out and talk about my journey. And I think that, the most impactful work that I've done as a Black queer woman in my career is in marketing. I am just as tenacious as you are and as resilient as you are when it comes to, pushing the genre and pushing the agenda on that diversity and inclusion when it comes to the big brands and letting them know that there is impact within the communities in which we're trying to touch and reach. So I really appreciate those points that you brought up. And of course, Nefertiti, you already know, I absolutely love just talking to you. You're such a bright spirit. So this was definitely a great duo.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, I'm all like, I just
So
want to
much.
talk all day. Like, yes, like, here we go.
Absolutely. Well, I want to say thank you, ladies, so, so much. And we'll definitely, keep in contact and, keep the conversation going behind the scenes. And I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today.